Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the perfect place to put a practice webinar on drdemographics.com. I'm Scott McDonald, and this is Mike Green. Say hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Thank you. You know, that's kind of a really old device that, whatever.
It's a little bit of a shot, though. I just do what I'm told. You know what I mean? I just, the old man speaks, and I just do what I'm told.
Since when do you do what I've asked you to do? I'm just wondering, whatever. All right, I'm not bitter. Okay. Now, let's kind of get going here. We have had a very interesting week. In fact, the last several weeks have been rather interesting. And I want to explain to you something that is going on. We have been rejected by several internet platforms. I'm going to tell you the truth. And that's partly because I use words and keywords when I'm describing what we're doing in these webinars and podcasts, and it's kind of ticked off people. So here, the reason is, I believe that the most important people to pay attention to are the doctors. In fact, in my humble opinion, the healthcare professionals should be in charge of healthcare. And I think that elected officials and regulators should not. I tend to think they don't know what the heck they're talking about. And in fact, I'll take it one step further. I believe that if you have a license to practice any kind of healthcare by a state, you want to be allowed to open your doors immediately and start providing that service. And here's my rationale as to why I'm saying this, and what gets me in trouble every time I talk about this online. There are some people who do not believe that doctors should be in charge of healthcare. They believe that we would be better off in some states if we would just keep everything closed, and I am absolutely against that. Now, it's not because I think doctors need to make a huge amount of money, because we all know you're rich, right? All right, I'm kidding. But in reality, I know that you provide a valuable service. We talk about essential services, and in my opinion, a veterinarian, by the way, is providing an essential service. There are animals that need care, that need their shots, that need to have emergency treatment. And somehow someone has said, no, we only want to have someone who's doing something that has to do with coronavirus, as that's essential. I am really upset by the idea that a tattoo parlor is an essential service. I'm really upset that marijuana vendors are an essential service. And yet, a dentist, an optometrist, you guys are somehow not. Well, that bothers me. So that being said, I want to give you kind of an update on what's going on right now, and to answer the big question, what comes next? And that's what we're going to be talking about in our program today. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to say, oh, now, Mike, before I move off this, have I done something I should have done? Presentation mode or whatever, or are we all right?
I see your screen. You just need to hit the little presentation thing on your PowerPoint.
Okay, so I'm going to hit my slideshow.
Okay.
There is no thing, by the way, that is...
There is a thing. I'll just show you where it is later.
Is that it?
It gets you the same result, yeah.
All right, then. So what do we do now? There are opportunities, risks, and challenges that we're facing. Now, here's what I'm calling the tattoos versus the doctors. Healthcare practices, in my opinion, right now, need to become a new legislated priority in America. This is getting me in trouble on the internet, but I still believe it. I think that doctors should not be shut down under any circumstance. Look, you already know how to avoid cross-contamination. You already know how to scrub down an operatory and how to treat patients and wear gloves and stuff like that. Guys, in my opinion, related and licensed healthcare practices should be allowed to open regardless of national disasters, political upheaval, and other emergencies. And I would like your help, you kind viewers and listeners, to please back me up. Write to your city council, write to your congressman. Let's put this in the law, because this ever happens again, I think it's a bad thing. Doctors should be in charge of medicine, not politicians. I don't necessarily think all politicians are evil, but I'm going to tell you, bad things happen when you get between patients and the doctor. Now, dentists, veterinarians, physicians, and all other licensed healthcare practices and non-emergency services, I mean, life-saving, should be allowed to be opened. Now, I want to congratulate the state of Ohio. It's not that Ohio is the only one. There are several states that have opened, but Governor Mike DeWine was one of the first to say we need to put it into legislation to open healthcare practices. And they are doing much better because of it. Now, Colorado, Utah, Texas, New Hampshire, and Georgia all followed suit very quickly. And these are now in law and regulation. Well, Utah didn't necessarily make a big lockdown order, and that is why something odd happened on Saturday in Utah. Everything pretty much opened. When I say everything, I mean everything. And people went outside and they were talking to their friends and their neighbors. Business has picked up dramatically in these states and several others that have opened. Oregon, by the way, gets an honorable mention. Now, I don't want to say this is a liberal versus a conservative thing. It's not a Republican versus a Democrat thing. But there is an attitude about doing healthcare business that I think as a demographic company, we are going to start informing people about. Now, if I get students, and I get a lot of students every week, will say, where should I go? Where should I get a job? Where should I open a practice? I am favorably going to mention those places that make it easier for practices and for doctors and their staffs to be able to make a living. What is odd is how many states there are that are not. And frankly, it's been very discouraging to me. Now, I want to open the demographic hall of shame on several locations, and they are the usual suspects: Chicago, New York City, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. They are not allowing doctors to open fully. But it's worse than that. We have the mayors, city councils, and other big elites in these communities that are deciding to get care and services themselves, but they don't believe that we should do that for other people. That is what I would define as hypocrisy, and it's a bad thing. So I'm just saying, yeah, I'm keeping track, and I'm letting people know about what's going on. So you'll expect to hear about this later on in the year. So forget the idea of red states and blue states. That is not as really important, I think, as to whether people vote a certain way. So if we look at Colorado, Colorado's governor, who is, by the way, a Democrat, has done kind of a remarkable job of trying to cooperate with the rest of the country on opening up a state. And that means they are not going to go bankrupt. But there are, in fact, states that are putting themselves on the edge, and this is going to become a major problem if you are a newly started practice trying to open in a place and you get taxed to death. Now remember, high taxes, high expenses, and high regulation are the enemy of professional private practice. It isn't necessarily that a person is of one political persuasion or another, but the fact that they cannot get their act together to be able to afford to maintain their states and the benefits that citizens are receiving is a big deal to me. Now, I want to praise the responsiveness to voters in certain states. And again, I'll go back to Colorado as a good example. They have reasonable management, as do those other states that I mentioned. Look, Florida and Texas have done an outstanding job. Georgia kind of went out there and decided to do things that were risky, and they are doing it in the name of being able to keep the practices in their states operating effectively. I bring this up because of a little bit of a touchy thing. I believe that most of the states in the United States are going to have a problem financially maintaining their budgets through the end of the year. Most. A few won't, but most will. But how quickly they respond to the will of the voters and make things affordable for those states, that matters to me as a demographer looking out for your best interests. Now, keep in mind, there is a big deal that I want you to remember, and there's a flux in demographics right now. So even though traditionally a particular county or city has been growing very well, and I won't bring who those people up just now, but there is a change that's happening so that a lot of the assumptions that we've had about where to put a practice based upon growth and the competition statistics, frankly, they're all changing. Now, I'm bringing this up because a lot of other demographic companies have not made the change. They may be saying that there are practices in this area, but they're not keeping ahead of the curve, so to speak, of budgets and taxations area to area. There are, in fact, some states that are doing well, but there are parts of those states that are doing really badly, and that they're mainly on a county basis. I will keep you informed of those as we go through the year and more data comes in. Now, avoid, well, okay, let's put it this way. There are some people who believe they should be rescued, their state, and they want to stick the debts that they've incurred on someone else. And I'm going to point right at Illinois as an example. And the thing that's so sad about that is the states that are surrounding Illinois have been very hard hit by this, and their economies have suffered, but they've been doing everything they can to try to keep their budgets going. Indiana, for example, is one that is really trying hard not to overtax its citizenry, which only means that the businesses moving into Indiana are going to do better because they are not burdened with public debt. Sticking debt on other people is going to be a bad thing, and I think we're going to see it increasingly. So I won't lie to you. I think we all need to keep an eye on that. Now, I want you to know that the enemy is not, well, let's just put it this way. Federalism is a good thing. And what I mean by federalism, it's as though the United States has gone through lots of little experiments. And some 50 states are taking their own path. That may be the best thing the United States could have done. And it doesn't mean that there's one way to success within our United States. Federalism actually has been a successful experiment, and I think it's working. So if anybody believes that we ought to get rid of the Electoral College, I think you better go back and read the Federalist Papers, because there are good reasons why the United States is set up that way. I know. You didn't really get in here so that I'd sit and just jabber at you about how hard life is. Now, I've told you some places that are doing well, and I'll told you some places that are not. I'm going to tell you some signs of good places. Ultimately, one of the important things that good places are going to have is a liberal attitude about opening. Those places that are allowing businesses to recover are going to be the most desirable in which you can practice. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because we've done research on it, and I've done this thing called the Flash Report. Now, the Flash Report is $225. It's only open for a very limited opportunity. And in fact, I don't know how long we're going to keep these going. Basically, it's a demographic report that is half price. We look at the demographics, the lifestyles or psychographics. We give you the maps. We will give you the up-to-date competition numbers as recently as they can be had. Now, some states are being reluctant to release those. But as important are the projections. We want to let you know what's going to happen in as little time as possible. You need to know in 5 years where the business is going to be. And that's something that we track. We offer drive time, zip code, and site analysis. So the Flash Report is an effort to try to help the doctors who are paying attention to this webinar and the podcast to know what to expect. And it isn't just for a guy who's thinking about buying a practice or just wants to start up. If you want to have a job, you want to know how good is the site going to be. Now, here's a little factoid I'm going to tell you, and please listen carefully. There are doctors, young doctors, who come out of school and assume, well, I'm just getting a job. It doesn't really matter whether or not the area is doing well. No, listen, I want you to understand, doctors, you young docs, you want to know how well the area is doing because a disproportionately large number of you are going to buy the practice that you're in, or at least entertain whether or not you want to have a fiduciary relationship with it. In other words, are you gonna have an equity interest in a practice? If you know this, even when you're getting hired, it's going to save your bacon. Now, it's only $225. It is a very limited time that we're doing it because, and I'm going to be honest, we're not making any money on it. This is really a service to you during a time of crisis. You guys, good research is not free. It comes from sources that we have to buy, and we have to do lots of analysis. I bring this thing up particularly with regard to competition. Now, as I look at a location and we're trying to say, is there enough competition, too much, about right, whatever, one of the things we're doing is trying to find out the likelihood that the doctors who are running that practice are going to stay. Now, there's a thing that some people are doing, which is kind of like, I'm taking the retirement option. If you got 4 partners and it's a group practice, a lot of times the older or senior doctor has the option of having his partners buy him out. And they don't necessarily have the chance not to do that. They kind of have to do it, and they're obliged to. If you know that there are doctors who are kind of dropping out of the market, it means that the competition ratio is more in favor of your purchasing or acquiring that practice. I rather assumed that doctors were going to stick around for a long time, but we've actually seen a large number of them who've said, I don't want to put up with the frustration that I have been. And so they're kind of opting out. Now, I bring this also up because, well, you guys, there are a lot of staff who've decided to take the option of 3, in some states, 5, 6 months, not to have to stay. So they're taking an option of being receiving unemployment benefits. They assume their job is safe. And in some states it is, in some states it isn't. But they're sort of thinking, the weather's nice, the kids are home from school, I want to stick around. I get that. But it also means that there's a little bit of a crisis in some practices, particularly in larger cities, that the staff doesn't necessarily want to come back in. Now, when this happens, there are ways that practices have to compensate, and often it's because of their hours of operation. If practices are not operating on a full-time schedule, you young doctors, it means there's a window of opportunity for you. I'm not saying it's good, and I'm not saying it's fair, I'm just saying it's true. So please pay attention to what I'm telling you. You've got to have your numbers looked at again. So if you happen to have a wonderful opportunity like this flash report, and we can do this in the rush report, guys, you better do this. You're not going to have a cheaper opportunity. Now, Mike, what do you have to say that's wise?
I don't know how wise it is, but as I was listening to you and thinking about the situation, I got thinking about a couple of different types of doctors. You have the types of doctors that are in the middle of it, have been in practice for a long time, and they're now seeing the attitudes towards the governing bodies of their communities and how willing they are to have them go back to work. That may align with them or not. But for younger doctors that are looking to place their practice in the country, I think it would be wise to look at this from a macro view and say, okay, is this community that is currently shut down, as much of the country is, but is not moving in a positive direction at all to allowing doctors to reopen their practice, is that really where I want to place down my roots? And I think that's an important exercise that you go through, because you may have your mind and set your mind and heart set on a particular part of the country. Maybe you grew up there, maybe you visited there once and it was beautiful, but you have to look at it from as I always say, an agnostic view, in that you can't be swayed one way or another by emotion. You have to make a analytical and fact-based decision. And right now creates an opportunity where we can really see in a micro level how the community governments are going to be favorable or not favorable towards doctors. And you need to make a decision of whether that aligns with what you are going to believe and want as a practice owner and as a business owner. And it's always important that we remember that you are not just a practice owner, you're a business owner. You have to think and act in the way of a business owner.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Now, I'm just going to tell you, as we go through the next few episodes, we'll probably talk about those states that have opened early that look like they're successfully making the conversion between where we've been and where we're going. Is this scary? Yeah, absolutely, it is scary. There's a lot of unknowns. However, there are a lot of states that are much better prepared to open and to make the people who run practices and have businesses in them successful. That is our business right now that Mike and I are looking at all the time. I was a little surprised that Tennessee turns out to be a really good choice for a lot of people. I always assumed that Florida was not so hot, but I'm going to tell you something, ain't looking so bad. If we look at a lot of these states that before we have an idea that they're not doing well, I have been surprised at how many have really stepped up to the plate. It is not just on the state level. We have to look at the smaller units like counties and sometimes major metropolitan areas where there's an opportunity. So look, you can do whatever you want to, doctors. I get that. But if you're smart, you're going to invest a little bit and see how we can help you figure out those places that are having the best opportunity. That's why I want you to go to our website landing page. Mike has put this up. We are going to be having some that I'm going to start talking about with the various practice types. I'm actually finishing up the book on oral and maxillofacial surgery. Where do you put one of those practices? So take a look at our website also. We actually are having some pretty good experience, and I'm proud of the work that we've been able to do there. So everybody, thank you so much for watching and listening to us. We look forward to talking to you in the near future. This is Scott McDonald, Mike Green at DrDemographics.com. Bye-bye.